Hello, I'm Beth Britton. I support Dementia Community with their communications work. Welcome and thank you for joining us for the latest in our autumn series of webinars. Before we get on to the topic for today, I just wanted to briefly explain a little bit more about Dementia Community. Dementia Community is a charitable community benefit society and membership cooperative that provides learning and networking opportunities for the dementia care community. We are an independent voice and inclusive organisation that provides learning and information for the dementia care community. We want people to feel connected, informed, inspired, empowered, purposeful, and engaged in co-produced changes that improve everyone's experiences of dementia care in both care and in wider society. This webinar is just one example of the many ways in which we do this. Dementia Community members own a £1 community share in Dementia Community, and membership is open to everyone. So if you aren't already a member, do join us. There are both benefits and opportunities for all of our members. My colleague Melanie Blake will put a link in the chat that will take you to our membership page. If you have any difficulties in joining Dementia Community, please do message Mel or myself and we will aim to help. So on to today's webinar. So our topic for today is driving and travelling safely with dementia. I will introduce you to our speakers shortly, but just some brief housekeeping first. We are recording this webinar, so if you don't want your face on the recording, please turn your camera off. Please use the chat for your questions. We will have a Q&A and discussion after the presentation, and we'll be keeping an eye on the chat. We hope to have some live participation too. So if you'd like to ask your question yourself, please raise your hand when we get to the Q&A. Afterwards, Mel will email you with the slides. The recording will also go onto our YouTube channel, the Journal of Dementia Care. So do look out for that. We will also ask you to provide some feedback afterwards, and we'd be very grateful if you would do that. And then one final piece of housekeeping. I know one of our speakers today very much wants to use the I Want to Speak card. So please look out for that. If you're living with dementia yourself and you would like to use those as well, absolutely, please do. And we will try and prioritise coming to you to allow you to speak as quickly as we can. So let's get started then. So our speakers for today are Nigel Hullah, Joy Watson, and Chris Norris from the Three Nations Dementia Working Group, and Dominic Hibbin, who is from the Regional Driving Assessment Centres. Chris Maddocks was due to join us today, but she has had an urgent commitment. So we're very grateful to Joy for stepping in at short notice to join us today. So Nigel, Joy, Chris and Dominic, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Beth. Thanks so much. And welcome everybody to, and thank you very much for hosting us on this, this particular webinar. As we know, dementia affects various parts of daily life. One of the most significant areas is mobility. Maintaining independence through transportation is vital for people with dementia, and today we'll explore how we can ensure transportation remains accessible, safe and supportive. And during the sessions, we hope to delve into the challenges, considerations for individuals with dementia who are driving, and how the transition from driver to passenger can be managed. We will also look at alternative transportation options and community-based solutions that promote autonomy and reduce isolation. We've got a very good panel, and the running order, Chris Norris will start the webinar. So we'll be the first speaker, then Joy, then Dominic. So that's enough from me, and all I can say is thanks to Beth for the invitation, and thanks to all the participants for turning up and to listen to us this afternoon. We enjoy doing these. We've been doing them now since 2020, so we're pretty keen. If you've got any questions and you're a bit nervous on putting your hands up, please use the chat box. I'll keep an eye on that, and we'll see what happens there. Okay, well, enough from me. The important people. Chris Norris, good morning, Chris.
Oh, good afternoon, Nigel.
Good afternoon. Yeah, I'm stuck in this. I'm used to doing this in the mornings, obviously.
I know.
Good afternoon, Chris.
Hello. Right, at today's webinar, I'll be looking at the question of whether a person with dementia can or should still drive. And if so, can they do this safely? There are generally many misunderstandings around this often discussed and contentious subject.
Should I go and see if they can phone to speak? No, that's me. But if you plug it in, well, I don't know. That's the problem with the half inch unless I can go.
Apologies, I think we've got somebody who unmuted themselves. So sorry, Chris.
So there are generally many misunderstandings around this often discussed and contentious subject. Today, we will aim to get to the correct nitty-gritty of the facts. As the background information on me, I'm a member of the Institute of Advanced Motorists, and prior to my diagnosis of frontal temporal dementia in December 2012, I was a police officer, a driving instructor, and finally a driving examiner. In the last occupation, I assessed the safety of people's driving ability for them to hold a full driving licence, and also carried out assessments for the local authority on existing licence holders to ensure standards were maintained. I still hold a full driving licence, which I must renew on a yearly basis. Now, I started my driving in the last century. No, it wasn't a Model T Ford. I passed my test in 1972, which was a time when less traffic was on the road and driving conditions were very different to how they are now. Driving, it was very intrinsic to my previous careers, and I was regularly assessed to a high standard. Let's look at the various stages that allow a person with a diagnosis of dementia to continue to drive. I've broken this down into 3 areas. 1, what happens in the memory service at the time a diagnosis is given. 2, the driving assessment. And 3, what the medical branch of the driving vehicle and licensing authority then does, and how they reach their decision on whether a driving license should still be in place for the person with a dementia diagnosis. When a person is having memory or cognitive challenges, they attend the memory service, where many in-depth tests are carried out to establish the cause of the difficulties that are being encountered. Following these tests, which can include MRI and CT scans, etc., a decision is made as to whether a diagnosis of dementia needs to be made. It is at this point a discussion should be had with the consultant as to whether it is possible to continue to drive. Quite often a person is told they can no longer drive. This is done without a physical assessment being carried out. This, I believe, should not be the case for many people that receive a dementia diagnosis. Before a license is revoked, it is only right that a person should be allowed to have a physical driving assessment to confirm whether they are fit and safe to continue driving. However, with the progression of dementia, there will come a time when a person should clearly not continue to drive. This will be when they are no longer aware or able to understand or react to what is going on around them generally, and would certainly be apparent when in conversation with the consultant, GP, or family members. A small percentage of driving is automatic from the subconscious around the physical actions required, but anticipation of and reaction to what is going on around us when we drive is essential for everyone's safety. Having received a diagnosis of dementia, there is a legal requirement to inform the driver vehicle and licensing authority and your vehicle insurance company of this fact. Having informed the DVLA, forms are sent out for completion by the person with dementia, which are then sent back to the medical department at the DVLA. At a conference I attended a while ago, the subject of driving and dementia came up. One of the people in the audience identified himself as a consultant and then stated categorically that as far as he was concerned, no person with a diagnosis of dementia should be allowed to continue to drive. Now, I was unable to respond to this statement as I was on the stage at the time, and I couldn't find him later to have what I would describe as a full and meaningful discussion on what I believe to be his absolute baloney and hogwash. It may be the policeman still in me, but I believe that a full investigation should be carried out and good evidence should be produced before a decision is made, which, without doubt, will cause a traumatic change to a person's life and those around them. For the last 12 years, prior to the renewal of my licence, I see my consultant and I'm asked a barrage of questions to establish what has been encountered in my driving in the past year. The questions range from have I had any near misses or accidents? Have I got lost or confused? Have I had a dizzy spell? Have I been stopped for speed offences for going too fast or too slow? And a myriad of similar questions. I have a similar conversation with my GP once a year. I'm happy to say that I've got a clean sheet so far on these questions. My wife is present at these sessions, and her reaction to my answers is watched carefully in case she might have a very different view to me. I have an understanding with my family that should they have worries and doubts about my driving, they will tell me. And should it come to the point where they no longer feel that my driving is safe, I will relinquish my licence. Now, there is no better guide to how a passenger is feeling than their hand subtly going up to the handle above the car door, or their feet starting to do a tango in the footwell. Of course, we all think we are the best drivers in the world, and woe betide anyone who criticises that fact. In reality, for everyone that drives, it is a privilege that was given to us when we passed our test. But if you're not meeting the standards that entitled you to a licence, then this privilege can and should be rescinded. So many people believe that it's an automatic right, which of course is not the case. I try to always remain mindful that if I'm involved in an accident, even when it might not be my fault, like if somebody shunts me up the back end, it still counts as something against me when answering the questions for the yearly assessment. Similarly, with insurance companies, it's a blotch on your driving record when it comes to renewal, particularly if you have notified them you are driving with dementia. For these reasons, I endeavour to always maintain the highest level of awareness around my driving skills. A question for the drivability professional that's here today is how do we get a driving assessment of part of the diagnosis, and how do we go about it if the DVLA has already cancelled our licence? So, moving on to the driving assessment. Before I retired as a driving examiner, I had a conversation with a driving instructor. Their senior citizen pupil had failed several standard tests. The instructor felt that this was very unfair, as he argued that she only wanted to pop into town and back once a week for shopping trips. He felt there should be a restricted type of licence that could be granted to cover this. Now, I've heard this similar suggestion put forward before, that a restricted licence could be granted to those living with dementia. This licence would restrict the person to only daylight driving, only allow lesser roads and not motorways, limit the person to their local town, and to limited hours of driving or miles. The question is, how would this be adequately policed and enforced? Yes, there could be a black box and GPS technology fitted to the car, but this does not address the fact that no matter how well a person knows their local area, it is still inhabited with other drivers, cyclists, and pedestrians whose actions and presence requires a good level of awareness, anticipation, and skill to deal with by the person living with dementia while driving. For this reason, I believe their driving should be subjected to a standard physical assessment to establish that all is well alongside the information and evidence that is obtained during their appointment with the consultant and GP. Now, these assessments are carried out at various drivability centres around the country. The assessment may possibly be carried out where you live, the assessment may possibly not be carried out where you live. So you may need to travel to a nearby town for the assessment to take place. Now, it's a good idea, if the assessment is not being in your hometown, to travel to the town prior to the assessment day so that you know where the drivability centre is, and you can have a drive around the town to get the feel of its layout. On the day, travel with a fellow driver, and it's a good idea to allow plenty of time for travelling, so you do not arrive all hot under the collar if there's hold-ups. Remember to take your driving licence with you, as you'll need to show this prior to the assessment. You'll not be able to use your own car for the assessment, but one will be provided that is fitted with dual controls. This could be similar to the make and car that you normally drive. Before setting out for the drive, a short cognitive assessment will be carried out by a psychologist, similar to the one you did at the memory clinic. On the assessment drive, you will have a driving instructor in the front seat and a psychologist will sit in the back seat. Remember, this is not a driving test like the one you did to originally get your license all those years ago. So don't try to change your normal driving style for the assessment, as this will just cause you needless stress. While out on the drive, you'll be given clear instructions as to where you are to go. If you don't hear what is being said, don't be afraid to ask for the instruction to be repeated. During the drive, you will be assessed around your safety and awareness with regard to what is going on around you, to the front, behind you, and both sides. It is important that you give clear indication of your intentions to other road users at all times and maintain good lane discipline at junctions and roundabouts. Be aware of the road signs, what they mean, and how to react to the information that they give. Having said all this, try to relax. Yeah, I guess that's easier said than done, but try anyway. On return to the Drivability Centre, there will be this discussion around what was found during the assessments, and a decision will be given with regard to your future continuation of driving. To finish my talk today, I'll now move on to the Driving Vehicle and Licensing Authority decision. I've spoken to the DVLA, and they outlined that a decision is made as to whether a person should be allowed to continue to drive after they've gathered together all the relevant medical reports and evidence from various sources to establish the continued safety for the person and society at large in allowing the person to continue to drive. On diagnosis of dementia, a person may voluntarily send back their licence and will cease to drive. If this is not the case, as a result of full investigations, the DVLA will generally make one of three decisions around the person being allowed to continue to drive and hold a licence. One, they'll allow the person to continue to drive for a further year without a physical driving assessment. Two, they'll allow the person to continue to drive with a 6-monthly or yearly physical driving assessment. Or three, the DVLA revokes the person's driving licence. Now, the question that often baffles people is why some people are required to take a driving assessment and some are not, and why the assessment is not offered and yet the person's licence still gets revoked. Well, hopefully, what I've outlined today has answered a few questions and possibly raised a few more. And I'm happy to answer questions now or later on in the webinar. So back to you then, Nigel.
Thank you, Chris. And I feel your pain actually, because I transitioned from a driver to a passenger quite quickly after diagnosis, because I handed my license in, to be quite honest. So now I do all my travelling with Lisa, who does the driving, and my right foot is constantly pushing the front of the passenger well. So I now learned that the best way to be is to sit in the back and not to be part of the whole driving experience, just to allow people to take it on. Chris, that's a very thorough, you presented a pretty thorough view of the difficulties that people may encounter once people get involved about their abilities to actually drive. I'm like most people, I understand the need to make sure people are safe, but I don't understand the need to take away a little bit of independence at the time when they're feeling less independent than they ever have in their life. And I think it's balancing up those two emotions, those two assessments, which are really important. Thank you, Chris. And as usual, thorough and a really nice presentation. What I'd like to move on now is Dr. Joy Watson, Baroness of Manchester, and her work that Joy has carried out with me, actually, and without me, in transportation, particularly using trains. To give you a bit of background, when we are members of the Rail Users Group, and somebody used Rail Users Group, and when the rail companies or the government was suggesting that they shut down all the ticket offices, we were part of that campaign. We wrote petitions. I had a meeting with Chris Fepp, who was then the Secretary of State for Transportation, and eventually, and I'm not saying because of us, but for people like us, they changed their position. And Joy is going to explain where she took off from there, and particularly a fabulous project that we did with the Rail User Group called Travelling in My Shoes. Joy.
Hi, yes, thanks, Chris. That was very informative. I probably don't need to ask any of my questions. So I'll go on to what Nigel was referring to. And I must just say that it was so exciting. I thought in the first instance, oh, this is going to be a bit sort of boring, but I was happy to do it anyway. But it turned out to be really quite exciting, and I learned quite a lot. Not that I travelled that much on the trains, but I could see where the organisation was coming from, and they were really quite keen to improve the accessibility and the helpfulness of the staff. And we did have an influence, as Nigel said, we had an influence in being able to keep the ticket offices open. I think the most encouraging thing was that the different voices from the transport people weren't dismissive. So they gave me the opportunity to travel quite a few different areas up to Manchester Airport and back, and stopping off at different stations and being able to point out to this gentleman what was helpful for people, not just living with dementia, but anyone with a disability. So he saw for himself the problems that we encounter, and he also saw how we negotiate a lot of the difficulties that could arise. The obvious things are support and all the different things that the platform and the stations and the stairs and everything have on people with a disability. Part of my journey was to visit several other major stations in the northwest. One of them being my local station, which I do use quite a bit, was Manchester Piccadilly. And I was just gobsmacked, really, because they've got an assistant lounge, and it is state of the art. You know, the facilities there are just really, really good. But they did ask me to comment on some of the things that might be improved, which I did. Carpets that weren't very helpful for people with dementia, and a few other things that would affect everyone with a disability. but they were so enthusiastic about changing things and bringing new ideas on board. Now that has led to us going to Liverpool Lime Street and setting up a similar lounge there. I think the idea being that we can show what Manchester Piccadilly has done and transfer all that knowledge that people with disabilities have put on the table, so that we can do a similar thing there. As I said earlier, the gentleman was open to suggestions. He didn't poo-poo the idea, like simple things. Like I said, if I'm in a disability chair being taken to the train, if the staff aren't trained, I would freak out, because I would think that they were going too close to the open platform. And it was just ordinary things like that I didn't think he would take much interest in, but he did. And I think that's so important, that people, whatever transport they're using, whether it's the trams, which I've got quite a good rapport with the tram company. I've done several sessions with them to point out what benefits us and things that maybe just need tweaking a bit. So it's nice to have people with disabilities, and especially people with dementia, to have a voice and to say what the transport needs are. I think that's probably all that I need to say. I don't know if there's anything else, Nigel.
Well, Chris has got a question there, I think.
Yes, Joy, were you wearing the Sunfire lanyard when you were doing your exploration?
Yes, I was.
And do you normally wear one whenever you're traveling?
I do, because I feel it benefits not just me, but other people. I think now that it's been recognised that people are more inclined to understand, if I bump into them or can't communicate as well as I would like. For me, it is a definite positive thing to do.
And on the bottom of your lanyard, does it identify that you are living with dementia, or do you not like to display that?
I do, in fact, I don't have on the lanyard, but I do have a badge that I designed myself, and it says I have dementia, or I have Alzheimer's, please be patient. Now, I use that at my discretion. I feel if I'm in a situation where it would be helpful, like supermarkets and places like that, or on the bus, but I don't wear it all the time.
Thank you.
I mean, I think you're punching below your weight there, because you have had a huge impact on the transport systems in in Manchester. I know that because I've been hauled into meetings with your best friend Andy, and he's used you as a sounding board for some of the changes that he's made. But you got to agree, this work that never stops, because we have to tell them, when they buy this traveling stock, where the stair and the entrance of the carriage is so high that you need a Sherpa and a pair of tongs to get onto it, and it's almost impossible if you've got luggage as well, that they really need to discuss it with the people who are using the services as disabled people. I think traveling alone as a woman is frightening enough sometimes, especially, at nighttime. But to end up on a station with no lights and no staff is ridiculous if you've got a disability, and it's something they need to think about. Joy, I'm sure.
Sorry, yeah, I think it's only people who want to not just have a voice for themselves, but to be a spokesperson for everyone with dementia, every disability. You know, if we don't speak up and point out these issues, then nothing's going to change.
No, it isn't. And I mean, shutting the ticket offices was such a stupid proposition. And you know, quite rightly they were taking the task over it. And I remember being endless meetings about people saying, "Well, there's the machines. Have you seen the machines? Have you tried to? You can't work the machines. Nobody can. You need a degree in computing studies just to make sure you buy the right standard class." Thank you, Joy, and I know you're held in high esteem in and around your place of Manchester. I know you don't like to hear it, but it's true. And long may you continue your efforts. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Dominic, and welcome.
Good afternoon, thank you.
How are you?
I'm all right, I'm all right.
Good. Our next speaker is Dominic with that wonderful accent of his. And you're going to tell us a little bit about your work and outcomes of your work with the Road Training Authority in Iceland, yeah?
Yeah, so we've been touched upon a little bit earlier on in the webinar. So we are a driving mobility centre. So we do the medical fitness to drive assessments. Driving mobility is a governing charity, if you like, of lots of other organisations that provide these assessments. And a good way to think of driving mobility is they're like Ofsted or the CQC. They ensure that whether you come to RDAC or any other provider, that the level of assessment, what you're going to be assessed on, would be standardised across the board. So in terms, some of what we do has been covered a little bit. The reason we exist really is yes, we need to make sure that people with a variety of medical conditions are safe to be on the road. But also we want to keep people driving for as long as they safely can. And driving is more about, it's more than just being able to drive a car. It's about social inclusion, it's about independence, it's about occupation sometimes, and quality of life. You know, I am blessed to be able to drive. I don't have a medical condition that impacts me. And if I want to go and visit a friend, I can jump in my car and I can go and do that. And to have that taken away is such an impactful thing for people. And sometimes there can be issues with people's driving, but there might be things that we can do, some techniques, some strategies that can actually keep them driving for longer. With dementia, certainly if we see people in the early stages of it, it doesn't mean that they're going to have to stop driving straight away. And it's really important that we do have a look at people to establish where they are, and whether we can keep them driving or not. When we're doing our assessments, so there's a couple of bits I'll touch on from earlier as well. A lot of clients will forget their driving license on the day. As long as they have driving entitlement, that is not an issue for us. So we have a direct line to the DVLA and we can check that entitlement over the phone. Very, very quick process. So all we need is that client to speak to the DVLA first, confirm who they are, confirm the details, and then the DVLA can release that information to us. So there are some get-arounds for things that people may turn up, maybe a little bit stressed about on the day. So when we do the assessment, we are looking at the medical condition. As it was said earlier, this is not somebody resitting their driving test. If you asked me to assess most people's standards of driving on the road, I would tell you that most people are terrible drivers with terrible habits that I wish they would correct. Our role in this is purely to look at that medical condition and the impact on driving. Somebody might be a pretty poor driver, but it's nothing to do with a medical condition. And in that scenario, we would point out the issues that we've seen on the drive, but we can only say somebody is unsafe from a medical perspective if it is the medical condition causing that. Our assessment teams are made up of a driving instructor who's done clinical training, and that is done through a university level course. And we will also have a health professional in the car. So it was said earlier that it's a psychologist. It doesn't necessarily have to be a psychologist. So we use occupational therapists who have undergone further training. Some centres use doctors, some use physios, some use nurses, but it has to be somebody with a medical background who's then done additional training in this field. While we're out on the drive, cognitively, the sorts of things we're looking at are people's ability to sustain and divide their attention. So the routes will often start off quite simple in layout, and they'll gradually become more complex with more things for people to have to focus on. Can they utilise their knowledge and their memory? So do they understand what a red traffic light means, for example? We'll often see with clients who are becoming unsafe through a condition like dementia, behaviours such as joining a roundabout and then stopping whilst negotiating it. And we often see that behaviour because the person has joined the roundabout and then they're not sure where they're actually going to exit. So the sensible thing is, well, I need to stop and have a look. And it's that memory of, actually, in this scenario, that's not a safe thing to do. Fatigue can be a big issue in driving. How does that affect somebody? Do they recognise it? And can they self-regulate that?
Dominic, sorry, can I stop you a second? Apologies.
Yeah.
Great Joy put her card up. She wanted to speak. If
Yeah,
that's
apologies from me as well, but as most people know, I will forget what I want to say. So thank you very much for your patience. One thing I wanted to ask is, along the lines you've just been talking about, how much information do you know about the certain disability before the test? Obviously there are lots of disabilities, but obviously I'm interested to know how much you know about the dementia condition and how that affects your judgment.
What we know largely depends on what the referrer tells us. Some referrers are very good and will give us quite a lot of information. Some referrers will give us the bare minimum, and to an extent that's beyond our control. When we start the assessment process will start off with about 15-20 minutes of discussion with the client. And what's really important for us in that discussion is that the client tells us from their perspective how the condition affects them. We will also, if the client's happy, include relatives in that discussion. But it's really important that we know what somebody's insight is to their own condition and how they feel it affects them. With pretty much every medical condition we see, how it affects each individual person is very, very different, regardless of what label it's being given. And it is really important. And there's other aspects, not just the medical condition. If somebody has been a truck driver or they've been an emergency services driver, their skill level is much, much higher than somebody who's driven to the shops and back since they passed the driving test. And these are all things that we'll gather information on to give us a bit of an idea. For example, we will see clients from a particular area near Bolton who don't encounter roundabouts, and they've never driven round a roundabout since they passed the driving test. So we then take them on our Manchester route near the Trafford Centre, and you've got multi-lane, very complex roundabouts. They're not going to deal with them very well. And what we've then got to establish is this because the dementia is affecting how they know what to do or their perception of what's going on around them? Or is it actually that just they're rubbish on roundabouts, but they've always been rubbish on roundabouts? one way that we can try to work that out on the day is by giving a bit of coaching. So we identify a problem, and then we'll identify it to the client. Can they do something about it? Not necessarily can they perfect what they need to do with it, but can they make some improvement? And if they can, that will sometimes indicate to us that actually this is a knowledge issue, and they've never been any good on them. As I say, what the drivers medical group at the DVLA are interested in is whether the medical condition impacts on safe driving. If you look at somebody and they've got bad habits and it's nothing to do with that medical condition, then you are discriminating against them because they've got a disability of some sort or a medical condition of some sort. I know many, many people who have no medical condition and are terrible drivers, and the people who can get them off the road are the courts and the police. And we can't discriminate or use this as a system to target bad drivers. As controversial as that may be, and yes, there's all sorts of moral arguments that can be made, but this process is about medical conditions and driving, and we are one cog in the whole driving system sort of world and the regulation of that. And our remit is the medical condition side of it, and the other side of it is somebody else's role.
Thank you so much. I hope you didn't mind me interrupting.
No, please do. I just will pre-warn everyone, I will have to go at 3 o'clock. I'm slightly time
We're
constrained
due to
today.
finish at 3 anyway, Dom. So do you want to? There's a
Yeah.
question in the chat, but you
Yeah.
were in the middle of speaking. Do you want to finish what you were telling us?
No, I can take the question. I was just discussing the sort of cognitive aspects we would look at. The other ones that would be relevant for dementia would be maintaining road position, and initiating sequences and tasks, and can somebody organise themselves in the immediate environment and prioritise what is safety critical in that environment.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Dom. Right, let's go to one of the questions then. So first of all, thank you to everyone who's been putting links in the chat, and I would encourage everyone to go and have a look at those. There's lots of great stuff been shared there, so thank you. And Nikki says, I live and work in Milton Keynes, famous for its roundabouts. It is indeed. I have driven around many of them. How much of the assessment process concentrates on a person's ability to negotiate roundabouts? It's extremely difficult to drive anywhere in MK without coming across one.
Okay, roundabouts feature quite heavily. There will be quite a number of roundabouts on the assessment. What you will also see is a lot of right turns at roundabouts. You'll see quite a lot of right turns throughout the drive anyway, particularly crossing the path of other traffic. And that's because that is one of the most difficult tasks cognitively. A right turn is significantly more cognitively demanding than a left turn. And you're having to divide that attention over lots of different things when doing that. So yeah, roundabouts are a big feature on our routes.
So if I live in this area of Bolton where people don't generally drive around roundabouts, I'm going to struggle. Anyway.
Yeah, which also makes our job of interpreting that drive more difficult. But if we're forewarned that somebody doesn't know how to deal with roundabouts, then we can look at, when we get to that part of the route, we'll see how the first one goes, and then do we need to give a bit of coaching? Do we need to talk them through what to do? Can we then see some improvement? What we might have to consider, and there's a whole range of options available to the assessment team. If we can decide on the day whether, yeah, we've seen an issue, but we can't determine whether it's the medical condition or lack of knowledge or habit that's causing that, what we might ask the client to do is go and have 2, 3, 4 hours of tuition on that area of driving, and then come back and see us. And if we can see some improvement with that, then that suggests it was a habit as opposed to the medical condition. So most assessments are very clear cut. Either somebody is safe or unsafe. There are some that fall and you sat on the fence. You can't really conclusively say either way, and that's where we might bring tuition into it.
Brilliant, thank you. Let me just bring Chris in before I come back to your response, Nikki. Chris.
Yeah, thank you. This is an A and B question. One, if somebody has already handed their license into the DVLA, is it then possible to get it back again? And how are they, if so, how are they going to go out for an assessment drive if they haven't got a license? On a previous webinar, I do remember somebody from the DVLA said that there's a possibility that a temporary license can be issued. And two, could you just talk about the debrief at the end, the assessment bit, and whether at the end of what you've had to say means that that person can no longer drive, even back from the assessment centre, which is why I included about a qualified driver with them. So that's a twofold question.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm just writing that down so I don't forget. Right. So in terms of the license gone back to the DVLA, it depends how it's gone back. So people can voluntarily surrender their license. The license can also be revoked by the DVLA. To keep that in simple terms, one is you giving it the DVLA and saying at the moment I'm not going to drive because I don't feel safe. The other one is the DVLA saying I'm taking it from you. If you've surrendered your license and you are then in the process of reapplying for that driving entitlement, if you meet certain criteria, then Section 88 of the Road Traffic Act could allow you to come for an assessment while the DVLA are making a licensing decision. The criteria can be found on the internet if you look up Section 88 of the Road Traffic Act, and the DVLA have quite a good leaflet on that. So Section 88 is one way that we could see somebody for the assessment. If the DVLA have revoked the license, then they can issue a temporary provisional license called a PDAL. The actual words are Provisional Disability Assessment License. That will sometimes allow tuition before the assessment, and increasingly the DVLA are allowing tuition before the assessment. The merits of that, there's lots of arguments both sides of it, but the DVLA are currently doing that. That license will come with a 12-month validity on it. However, it will also come with an accompanying letter, and that will have a different expiry date on it. That could be 3 months, it could be 6 months. The reason they issue a 12-month card is because they don't issue cards that are less than 12 months. The validity is what's on the letter, not what's on the card. What we would also do is on the day of assessment, we would take that license and we would shred it basically. So on the day of the assessment, it ceases to be valid. So yeah, there are temporary licenses. There's also Section 88 of the Road Traffic Act, depending on the circumstances. We've also done off-road assessments for some clients to assist with their application. They're very, very limited, especially when it's cognitive concern. So they don't give us loads of information, but they might support in somebody reapplying to come in for an on-road assessment. For part B, I hope that's answered part A. So part B of the question, in the debrief, the decision is a joint decision by the assessment team. They will then communicate that with the client. If we are advising somebody not to drive, we are not the DVSA, we are not a statutory body, so we are recommending, and this is one of the reasons there is a health professional involved. So the client is then being advised by a health professional that they are unsafe to continue driving. In terms of driving entitlement, they still have driving entitlement the same as when they came in to see us. Where they could have an issue is their insurance. So a lot of insurance companies, if something was to happen on the way back from that assessment centre and it then becomes clear to the insurance company that they've been advised not to drive, there is a high chance that their insurance would be invalid at that point. And that is the advice the assessment team should be giving. If they're not, I want to know about it. But yeah, so it's more of an insurance issue. That would be the issue. We always advise our clients to attend with somebody, and we will always recommend that they do not drive away from the assessment centre. We can't physically stop them, and there is not a lot the police would be able to do with it either. So yeah, it's definitely not recommended. What we also do, and this is more specific to RDAC. I can't say that all DM centres do this. They probably should. But if we have an unsafe outcome, we do notify the DVLA that we've had an unsafe outcome, and they would receive a copy of the report.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Dom. Was there anything else you wanted to add before I've certainly got a question that I definitely want to make sure we answer before we leave today, because I think it's quite pertinent probably to some of the people that are on the call today, although nobody's asked it yet. But is there anything else you wanted to add? No. Okay. Let me just bring you in, Nigel, before I get to my question. Is there anything you wanted to add, Nigel?
Just thanks for hosting this. It's been a pleasure, and thanks to all the participants. Keep your eyes out for our Three Nations webinars, which we do monthly now. And thank you again, Beth, for the opportunity.
Oh, you're most welcome. So let me ask my question then to all of you, actually. Perhaps, I don't know who's in the best position to answer, but my question was going to be, a lot of people really struggle with the idea of not driving anymore. And it can quite often be family members that spot that before perhaps some people are willing to accept that actually this isn't a great idea for them anymore. So my question was, what would be the advice you would give to a family who are concerned about a loved one driving? What would you say to them? What would be your advice?
Well, that's a sticky one, isn't it? Really.
It is.
I mean, I have come across it, and I have come across where people have found the ways around it, particularly if their partner has perhaps popped into hospital for an operation, nothing to do with their dementia, but unfortunately, while they were in hospital, the car has broken down, and the partner's taken it to the garage, and the garage has said, well, we can't, it's going to cost a fortune to fix it, and it'd probably be best if we get rid of it, which is very sneaky and not honest, but sometimes that's a way of doing it. It's not one that I would recommend. But to me, there's nothing you don't have to go to a drivability centre because you've got a condition. Well, you go there because you've got a condition, but you can voluntarily ask to go there. You haven't got to wait to be referred by the health authority to go there. You can actually ring them up and say, look, I just like a second opinion on my driving here, because my wife or my partner says that she'll never sit in the car all the time I'm driving. Can I come along? And I think for around about a fee of about £70 or £80, I think it is, then an assessment can be carried out. And so it's much better for you to reach that decision yourself, that you decide, well, I'm no longer going to drive, than somebody coming along and taking away something that you've had for maybe 50, 60 years. It's much better. But if you've got independent advice from a professional who's assessed you properly, then when you're told that, then you probably would go, well, actually, I think you're right, or my partner's right, or the children are right, and I'll go along with it. So I guess that's the only way forward to do it, really. One's a sneaky way of doing it, and one's a sort of will cost you money, but both will work.
I also think it has to be done with sensitivity, because don't forget the person may be reeling from all the effects, particularly early onset, working age. They may have lost their job or told they can't do their job. They're dealing with the diagnosis. They're looking now at losing one more piece of independence. So it's not a simply matter of safety and all the rest of it. I mean, that is a major concern, obviously, but top of the list, people's ability to deal with what's happening to them. in a structured way. And honesty is the best way, you know.
And
I'll
Dom,
take
could
it
you
from
just
there.
confirm that what I said was correct? That you can voluntarily get an assessment?
Yeah, you can. The big difference with RDAC currently, if a health professional makes the referral, there is currently no cost to the client if you come and see us. That can be your GP as well. So currently that can make it more accessible to people by just asking the health referrer to the professional, sorry, the health professional to fill in the form on your behalf. That's slight difference, and that's just a current agreement we have with the NHS. Not all DM centres have that arrangement, but we currently do.
Brilliant.
It's a shame more people don't know about that.
It is. If somebody phones RDAC and are going to do a self-referral, they will be asked by our admin team whether they have somebody who can refer them. So we will try and encourage people to do that.
Yeah.
How long they can stay free to health professional referrals, I'm not sure. But currently they are.
You might get a stampede now, Dom, now that we've let that cat out the bag. Now I know you need to go. Joy, you had put your card up that you wanted to speak.
Yeah, it was only a follow on from what Nigel said, really, that you know, it's just another thing. It's another loss. You know, it's like a bereavement. You lose all sorts of things, and your ability to be able to be independent by driving, it's just another grief thing.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot. I do memory assessment work in memory clinics. I do peer reviews for those, and I know that, you know, the subject of driving is a very emotive one for many people when they go through that diagnostic process and what's going to come. And as you say, Nigel, it's about independence, isn't it? It's not just about the ability to get from A to B. We are out of time. It's been fantastic to hear from you all. And thank you to everyone who's put links in the chat as well. Hope you found this afternoon really informative. So my thanks to Nigel, to Chris, to Joy, and to Dominic for their time. Please do check out the Three Nations Dementia Working Group webinars. They do some fantastic stuff. We're very grateful for you all to come along for us today. So thank you very much. And then if I could just move us on to our next webinar, so it'll be our final one for the year. So it is called The Gift of Connection and Communication. It is on Monday, the 2nd of December at 2 till 3 p.m. Booking is live, and my colleague Mel will pop a link in the chat, or I will go and harvest one in a second, so that you can come along and join us for that. It's going to be all about validation, so we hope you would join us for that. And thank you again to our guests today.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Mm-hmm.